Let me be perfectly honest with you. When my superiors at the Vrethkai High Command assigned me to monitor a third-tier, oxygen-rich single-moon planet in the outer spiral of the Calvin Galaxy, I did not weep tears of professional gratitude. I did not stand up straight and salute with pride. I sat in my chair, blinked my 4 eyes slowly, and said, very quietly, to absolutely no one, "They are serious. My name is Vrox, Senior Intelligence Analyst, Grade 7, Vrethkai Galactic Empire. I have spent 42 standard cycles decoding intercepted transmissions from the Dorathi Confederacy. I have mapped the military infrastructure of 6 star systems. I once stayed awake for 11 consecutive rotations, tracking the movements of a Pelexi battle fleet, and I found it, every single ship, every single one. And now they wanted me to watch humans. Humans, who at the time of my assignment were still arguing about which of their many governments owned the clouds. My colleague Drell, who sat 2 desks away from me in the monitoring bay and had the permanent expression of someone who had just smelled something unfortunate, leaned over when she heard the news. She said, "Vrox, you must have done something truly terrible to deserve this." I had not done anything terrible. I had filed my last mission report 4 days late. 4 days! After 42 cycles of perfect service. Commander Tivan, my superior, a tall, silver-scaled officer who carried his authority the way some beings carry a very heavy coat they refuse to take off, had looked at me across his desk and said without blinking, "You will go to the human sector, you will observe, you will report, and you will remember, the next time you consider submitting a late report, that this is what happens." I remembered. Our ship, the Vrethkai Long-Range Observation Vessel designation KOL-7, entered the outer observation corridor of the human solar system on the 14th day of my assignment. We were cloaked, of course, standard procedure, not because the humans could detect us. They absolutely could not. We cloaked because it was regulation, and because our young technician Sorrel, who was 17 cycles old and entirely too enthusiastic about his work, had spent 3 days calibrating the cloak and seemed personally invested in using it. Active and holding at full spectrum, Sorrel announced from his station, his pale green crest rising with satisfaction. No human sensor system within range has any idea we exist. That is both reassuring and deeply unsurprising, I said. Sorrel's crest fell slightly. He was still learning how to receive my observations. I settled into the primary analyst seat and pulled up the initial survey package on the planet designated, in human terminology, as Earth. I had read the historical files during transit. I had read them thoroughly. I am a thorough being. It is perhaps my defining characteristic. Naim says my defining characteristic is that I never stop talking, but Naim is wrong about a great many things. What I knew about humanity at that moment was this. They had evolved on a single continent and then, with the restlessness of a species that could not sit still for more than 3 generations at a stretch, spread to every habitable surface of their planet. They had achieved rudimentary heavier-than-air flight roughly 140 of their years ago. Since then they had developed commercial aviation networks, military aircraft of increasing sophistication, and approximately 7 decades ago they had managed to leave their atmosphere entirely using controlled chemical explosions. Let that settle in for just a moment. Controlled, chemical, explosions. The Vrethkai developed gravity-fold propulsion 3,100 years ago. Before that, we used magnetic pulse drives. Before that, compressed ion thrust. At no point in the recorded history of our species did any Vrethkai engineer sit down, look at a tube full of burning liquid fuel, and say, "Yes, this is how we go to space." Yet here were the humans, doing exactly that, and acting enormously proud of the accomplishment. Which, to be fair to them, within the context of what they were working with, was not entirely unwarranted. I watched them for 3 days before I sent my first report. On the first day I watched their air traffic. There were thousands of aircraft moving through their lower atmosphere at any given moment. Commercial transports, mostly. Large, ungainly things that flew on fixed aluminum wings through the sheer faith of Bernoulli's principle and the sustained optimism of the passengers inside them. Their military aircraft were sharper, faster, and clearly built by beings who had decided that the concept of a gentle curve was a waste of time. The humans called some of these aircraft fighter jets, which I found charming, in the way that a child swinging a stick calls it a sword. On the second day, I watched their orbital activity. They had a space station. 1. It circled their planet in a low orbit, housing a rotating crew of between 3 and 13 humans at any given time, and it was, by every objective Vrethkai standard, the engineering equivalent of a garden shed bolted to the side of a mountain. The humans called it an international space station, which implied cooperation between their various governments, which I found considerably more impressive than the station itself. Getting humans to agree on anything was, based on the files I had read, a minor miracle on its own. On the third day, something mildly unusual happened. It was Sorrel who noticed it first. He had been running passive scans of the human test facility networks, the secure research installations scattered across the planet's land masses, and he turned from his console with that specific expression he wore when he had found something he could not categorize. "Analyst Vrox," he said, "I am reading unusual energy signatures from a human facility in the northern desert region of their primary continent." I set down the survey report I was annotating. "Define unusual." "It does not match any known human energy profile," Sorrel said. He pulled the reading up on the main screen. I looked at it. I looked at it again, more carefully, which is something I rarely need to do twice. The signature was faint. It was irregular. It had the messy, unpolished edges of something new and imperfectly understood. But underneath all of that, buried in the noise the way a stone is buried under mud, there was something that made a very specific part of my analytical brain sit up straight. It looked, distantly and approximately, and with a great deal of generous interpretation, like the early harmonic profile of a gravity-fold generator. Not a working one. Not even close to a working one. It looked the way a child's drawing looks like a house. You could see the intention. You could see the general direction of the thinking, but the execution was, to put it professionally, nascent. "Log it," I said. "Flag it as Category 3, watch and monitor." "Not Category 2?" Sorrel asked. "They almost certainly blew up a very expensive piece of equipment," I said. "Log it as Category 3. I filed my first report that evening. It was thorough, accurate, and professionally dismissive. The humans were developing as expected. Their aviation sector was mature but conventional. Their space program was ambitious within its limitations. One anomalous energy reading had been detected at a desert research installation, likely the result of experimental high-energy physics work. No strategic significance. Recommend continued passive observation at current intervals. Commander Tivan responded in less than one cycle. His message read, "Acknowledged. Continue monitoring. Next report in 10 days. No praise. No acknowledgement of thoroughness. 10 days. I looked at Nime's empty chair. She was running a genuine priority assignment in the Dorathi border region. She would probably find the irony of my situation funny if I told her. I decided not to tell her. Instead, I went back to watching the humans. The human I came to think of as the one who started everything was named Zara Voss. I did not know her name for some time. I first identified her as Target 14 Alpha, which is the cold and impersonal language of surveillance work. She was a human female, approximately 34 of their years old, with the kind of face that expressed opinions even when the mouth was closed. She worked at the desert facility where the anomalous energy reading had originated. She arrived at the facility every morning at a time I came to recognize as unreasonably early, even by the standards of a species that seemed to regard sleep as an interruption to work rather than a necessity of life. She led a team. I could see that clearly even from orbital observation. The way the other humans in the facility oriented toward her when she entered a room, the way discussions resolved themselves in her direction, the physical language of deference that hierarchical social species demonstrate whether they are aware of it or not. Her team was working on something in a large hangar at the edge of the facility's main compound. The hangar had been recently expanded. I cross-referenced the construction timeline with the satellite imagery in the archive files. The expansion had begun roughly 20 months ago, and the building had tripled in floor area. On the fourth day of my observation, they moved the thing inside the hangar out onto the tarmac. I want to be precise about my first reaction, because I believe honesty is essential when writing for the historical record, and because I am professional enough to admit when I am wrong, which I rarely am, but this was one of those times. My first reaction was amusement. The aircraft was, externally, a mess. It was large, very large. The wingspan exceeded that of any human commercial transport I had observed by a significant margin. The fuselage was elongated in a way that seemed structurally reckless. The engine nacelles were oversized and positioned at angles that made no aerodynamic sense by any human aviation standard I had catalogued. The surface of the aircraft was covered in panels of a material that my sensor suite could not immediately identify, which was interesting but not immediately alarming. Humans sometimes stumbled onto novel materials through the same process they stumbled onto most of their innovations, which was a mixture of deliberate research and industrial accident. The overall impression was of an aircraft designed by a committee where everyone had brought a different idea and no one had felt comfortable saying no. I noted it in my observation log as prototype designation unknown, design irregular, function unclear. I noted the material anomaly separately, and then I watched the humans gather around it on the tarmac, and I watched Zara Voss walk around the entire aircraft with a device in her hand, touching panels, checking seams, and I watched her, at the end of this inspection, turn to a man standing nearby and nod once, very firmly, with the expression of someone who has been waiting for this moment for a very long time. The man was Finn Okafor. I would learn his name later too. He was tall for a human, with a calm, deliberate manner that I came to recognize as the specific tranquility of someone who has chosen a dangerous profession and made their peace with it. He was the pilot. I could tell from the way he looked at the aircraft, not with the administrative gaze of an engineer checking a product, with the particular attention of someone who intends to be inside it when it moves. On the 5th day of my observation, they fueled it, taxied it to the runway, and flew it. I expected it to be unremarkable. I was prepared for a maiden flight of the kind humans typically performed, a cautious low-altitude circuit of the test area, a careful speed progression, a landing, a great deal of data collection. Everyone goes home, nothing changes in the universe. The aircraft lifted off cleanly. Its climb rate was faster than I expected, but within the range of human high-performance aircraft. It leveled off at an altitude of roughly 12,000 of their meters. Finn Okafor, who I could see now on the telemetry feed Sorrel had intercepted from the facility's internal network, reduced throttle and flew in a wide arc above the desert. So far, unremarkable. And then, at approximately the 42nd minute of the flight, the energy signature returned. Not faint this time. "Analyst Vrox," Sorrel said, and his voice had changed. Sorrel was young, but he was well trained, and trained Vrethkai analysts did not let excitement into their voices without reason. "I am reading a gravity-fold harmonic from the aircraft." I was already looking at the data. My analytical brain, which I mentioned sits up straight at moments of interest, was now standing on its seat. The harmonic was still imperfect, still rough, still recognizably the work of beings who did not fully understand what they were building. But it was stronger than the desert facility reading had been, much stronger, and it was stable. It was holding a consistent output for seconds at a time, which is not a thing that early-stage gravity-fold generators do. Early-stage generators pulse, they fluctuate, they fail, they do not hold. "Category 2, I said. "Upgrade the flag to Category 2. "What are they doing?" Sorrel asked. "I have no idea," I said, which was absolutely the most unsettling sentence I had spoken in professional memory. I filed a priority update to my report that night. I was precise, I was thorough, I included every data point, every waveform reading, every comparative analysis against known Vrethkai gravity-fold prototype signatures at equivalent developmental stages. I was careful to frame my conclusions conservatively, because I am a professional and professionals do not alarm people unnecessarily, but I did note at the bottom of the report in plain language that the humans appeared to be developing gravity-fold technology approximately 800 years ahead of any timeline that Vrethkai strategic models had projected. Commander Tivan responded in 4 hours. His message read, "Sending Drell to join your team. Upgrade mission to Category 2 priority. Daily reports required." I stared at his message for a long time. Then I went back to my console and watched the aircraft, which had landed and was being surrounded by a crowd of humans who were talking very fast and waving their arms, which is what humans do when something has gone well. Zara Voss stood slightly apart from the group, looking at the aircraft, not with celebration, with the focused measuring gaze of someone who has confirmed one thing and is already thinking about the next. I found, to my mild professional discomfort, that I understood exactly how she felt. Drell arrived on the 8th day. She came aboard the KOL-7 in her standard gray monitoring uniform, with her silver analyst's badge and the expression she always wore when she suspected she was about to be handed someone else's problem. "Tell me everything," she said, before she had fully cleared the docking corridor. I told her everything. Sorrel helped, pulling up data feeds and waveform comparisons while I talked. Naim sat in the observer's seat across from my console and listened without interrupting, which was how you knew she was genuinely concerned. Naim interrupted constantly. It was her natural state. When she went quiet, the situation was serious. When I finished, she sat still for a moment. Then she said, "The humans." "Yes," I said. "The humans," she said again, with a different inflection. "I know," I said. They have been flying powered aircraft for 140 years, she said. Correct. The Vrethkai spent over 600 years at the electromagnetic propulsion stage before we made the conceptual breakthrough to gravity fold theory, she said. Also correct. She looked at the main screen, where the current feed showed the desert facility in late afternoon light. The unusual aircraft was back in its hangar. Zara Voss's team moved around the compound with the purposeful energy of people who had slept very little and intended to sleep very little for the foreseeable future. How? Naim asked. I do not know, I said. Best theory. Several, I said, none of them comfortable. The least comfortable theory, and the one I was increasingly unable to dismiss, was that the humans had not stumbled onto gravity fold theory by following the same research path the Vrethkai had taken. They had not started with electromagnetic propulsion and worked methodically through the theoretical prerequisites over centuries of careful scientific development. That path, the path every known spacefaring civilization had followed in one form or another, took time. It took the kind of gradual intellectual infrastructure that accumulated across generations, each one building on the last, each one advancing the understanding incrementally until the final breakthrough became, if not inevitable, at least predictable. The humans had not done that. What the humans had done, based on the research papers I had intercepted from the facility's network, and Sorrel had been downloading everything he could reach, was something considerably stranger. They had approached the problem from the wrong direction. They had started not with propulsion theory, but with something they called resonance dynamics, which had originated not in their physics community but in their materials science community, specifically from a research branch that had been trying to develop better aircraft surfaces. Better surfaces, to reduce drag, for their conventional aluminum tube and Bernoulli aircraft. Someone, at some point, working on the problem of how to make an aircraft surface that interacted with air molecules more efficiently, had accidentally generated a localized gravitational distortion. An accident. The Vrethkai had developed gravity-fold technology through 3,000 years of deliberate, rigorous, incremental scientific effort, and the humans had tripped over the fundamental principle while trying to make an airplane slightly less noisy. I found this, professionally speaking, maddening. I found it maddening in the specific way that you find maddening a thing that should not have worked, that violated every expected sequence of events, that made you question whether the universe had been arranged in the orderly fashion you had always assumed. I had, at this point in my life, never questioned the orderly arrangement of the universe. I had always found it reliable and reassuring. I was now in the process of revising that position. The materials, Naim said, after I had walked her through all of this. The surface panels on the aircraft. Yes, I said. They are the origin of the resonance effect. The aircraft is not carrying a gravity fold generator in the traditional sense. The surface itself is generating the harmonic. Nim was quiet again. Sorrel, at his console, had the expression of a young being watching something historic unfold and not entirely sure how to feel about it. So they have built, Naim said slowly, a flying machine whose skin generates gravity-fold harmonics. In the broadest and most generous interpretation of each of those terms, yes, I said. And they do not know exactly what they have, she said. They know they have something, I said. They know it is important. The data suggests they understand the resonance effect itself reasonably well. Whether they understand what it will eventually mean for propulsion, for faster-than-light transit, for everything that follows from it, I do not believe they have made that leap yet. Yet, Naim said. Yet, I agreed. We both looked at the screen. The facility was dark now. Most of the lights in the compound had gone off. One window in the main research building was still lit. A single figure moved behind the glass, working late or early, depending on how you looked at it. Zara Voss. Almost certainly, because it was always Zara Voss. On the 10th day, Finn Okafor flew the aircraft again. This time they pushed it harder. I watched the entire flight from my console with my full attention and a level of personal engagement that I would not have admitted to in a professional review. Naim sat beside me. Sorrel had set up an automatic alert system that would notify us if any reading crossed a threshold we had defined. For the first 20 minutes of the flight, the alerts were quiet. Then the pilot pushed the throttle past a point that the facility's telemetry feed marked in red, and everything changed. The gravity-fold harmonic that the aircraft's surface had been generating at modest, irregular intervals suddenly resolved. That is the only word for it. It resolved, the way a musical instrument being tuned stops being noise and becomes a note. One moment the waveform was the rough, fluctuating, imperfect signature of an accidental discovery. The next moment it was coherent, stable, and clean in a way that made my instruments recalibrate automatically because they were not expecting to read something that clean from a human source. Sorrel's alert system went off. All of the alerts went off at once. "Vrox," Sorrel said, and his voice was very controlled and very young. "I see it," I said. The aircraft's speed increased, not from the engine thrust. The engine thrust based on the telemetry data was actually decreasing. The aircraft accelerated because the gravity fold harmonic was interacting with local spacetime in exactly the way a functional gravity fold system was supposed to interact with local spacetime, and the interaction was, measurably, working, not perfectly. The coherence lasted 11 seconds before the surface resonance destabilized and the harmonic collapsed back into noise. The aircraft shuddered, based on Finn Okafor's control inputs, which we were reading in real time, and he pulled back to standard flight parameters with the smooth, unhurried precision of a pilot who had expected something to go wrong and had prepared for it. 11 seconds. The aircraft had operated on genuine gravity fold harmonics for 11 seconds. The Vrethkai had not achieved 11 continuous seconds of coherent gravity fold output in their first 300 years of dedicated gravity fold research. I filed my report. I filed it immediately. I did not wait for evening or for a complete analysis pass or for NIM to review my language. I wrote it and sent it with a priority flag that I had never used before in my career, the kind of priority flag that by regulation woke up command staff at whatever hour it arrived. The report said in its essential conclusion the following: Earth's human population has independently developed a functional, if nascent, gravity fold propulsion method. Current capability, 11 seconds of coherent operation. Development trajectory, unknown but rapid. Strategic assessment. This situation requires immediate senior review. Commander Tivan's response came in 90 minutes. 90 minutes, in the middle of his rest cycle, which meant someone had indeed woken him up. The message was longer than his usual responses. It said, "Confirmed priority upgrade to Category 1. Full surveillance team deployment authorized. Do not make contact. Do not allow detection. This is now a strategic watch mission. Report any and all development in real time." Then, at the very bottom of the message, in a tone that I recognized as the tone of a being who was revising a previously comfortable assumption, he had written, "How long until they have a working system?" I looked at that question for a while. Then I wrote back, "At current development pace with linear progression, possibly 12 to 15 years. However, human innovation does not typically proceed linearly. I recommend planning for 8. Tivan did not respond to that estimate. Sometimes silence is its own answer. I turned back to my console. The aircraft was landing. Finn Okafor brought it down on the desert runway with steady, practiced ease, and the crowd that had gathered again on the tarmac was doing the human arm-waving thing again, but louder and faster than before. Someone embraced someone else. Someone else sat down on the ground, which is a human response to strong emotion that I had read about but found, seeing it in person, oddly affecting. And Zara Voss, standing again at the edge of the group, looked up, not at the aircraft, not at her team, up into the sky, into the blue atmospheric haze through which her aircraft had just passed into something new, into the direction of space, though she could not see space from where she stood in the afternoon light. She looked up for a long time. I had been watching humans for 10 days at that point. I had found them in turns baffling, mildly entertaining, industrious, irrational, occasionally admirable, and frequently inexplicable. I had done what all Vrethkai analysts did when assigned to primitive category civilizations. I had maintained professional distance. I had observed without investment. I had compiled data rather than stories. But I watched Zara Voss look up at the sky that she and her team were in the process of redefining, and I felt something that my professional vocabulary did not have a precise word for. It was something close to the Vrethkai concept of Kyle Voss, which translates approximately as the recognition in another being of a hunger that matches your own. I had been an analyst for 42 cycles because I was good at finding things, because I liked the chase, the slow accumulation of data into meaning, the moment when scattered signals resolved into a picture. I understood, looking at this human female in the desert light, looking up at a sky she was not yet finished with, that she understood exactly what that felt like. She was not done, not remotely done, and either. I was beginning to understand with a sensation that was equal parts professional alarm and something I could only call reluctant respect, were the humans. I closed my observation log for the day and opened a new file. Not a report file, a personal notes file. Analysts were not required to keep personal notes. Some of us did anyway. I titled the file Earth, Day 10. They found the note. They don't know they are playing the whole song yet. Then I saved it, pulled up the live feed, and went back to watching, because something was coming. I could feel it in the data, in the trajectory, in the rate of those careful, methodical, restless humans in their desert facility pushing a thing they barely understood into territory they had no map for. Something was coming, and whatever it was going to be something I had not seen before. In 42 cycles of intelligence work. I had never said that about anyone. I want to tell you that the following 3 months were quiet, that the humans took their 11 seconds of coherent gravity fold output, filed it carefully in a research binder somewhere, and settled into the slow, responsible pace of incremental scientific development that every other known civilization had followed when they accidentally found themselves on the edge of something enormous. I want to tell you that. I cannot tell you that, because it would be a lie, and I am many things, but I am not a liar. The humans did not slow down. The humans, in point of fact, did the opposite of slowing down, in the specific way that a boulder does the opposite of slowing down when it reaches a slope. They accelerated. They accelerated with the specific, focused, slightly reckless energy of a species that had spent its entire technological history being told by physics that certain things were impossible and had developed a cultural reflex, deep and apparently involuntary, to respond to impossibility by working longer hours. By the end of the first month after the 11-second flight, Zara Voss's team had extended coherent gravity fold output to 47 seconds. By the end of the second month, they were at 3 minutes and 12 seconds. By the end of the third month, they had stopped counting in seconds. I watched all of it, every test flight, every late-night calculation session that I could read, imperfectly but adequately, through the facility's network. Every argument in the research bay, and there were many arguments, because it turned out that Zara Voss's team included a materials physicist named Dio Holt, who had the quality of a person constitutionally incapable of agreeing with anyone, including himself, and an aerospace engineer named Petra Selk, who communicated primarily through diagrams and had very strong opinions about structural load tolerances that she expressed by drawing on any available surface with whatever writing instrument was nearest to hand, including, on one memorable occasion, a protein bar wrapper. I logged all of them. Dio Holt's arguments, Petra Selk's wrapper diagrams, the way Finn Okafor sat in the briefing room during technical discussions with the particular patience of a pilot who has learned that the people who build the machines he flies have to work through every disagreement before they hand him the controls, and who has made his peace with that. I logged all of them because I was an analyst, and analysts log things. I also logged them because I was, in the private and professionally inadmissible corner of my consciousness, completely gripped. Nim noticed. Of course Nim noticed. Nim had known me for 30 cycles, which was enough time to notice everything. "You are enjoying this," she said, on the 48th day of our combined watch, without looking up from her own console. "I am doing my job," I said. "You are doing your job," she agreed, with an expression I have not seen on your face since the Palaxi Fleet mission. "You found the second carrier group, and you sat exactly like that for the following 6 hours. That was professional satisfaction," I said. "This is something more than professional satisfaction," she said, and then she went back to her console and did not say anything further, which was worse than if she had continued. I sat exactly like I was sitting and watched the screen. The new full surveillance team that Command had authorized had arrived by then. 2 additional observation vessels, the KOL-9 and a short-range monitor craft called the Gefelton, had positioned themselves in the outer observation corridor alongside us. Our total team was now 11 analysts, 4 technicians, and 1 communications officer named Brix, who was 6 cycles old, entirely too cheerful for the situation, and had a habit of narrating the human activity feeds in a low, dramatic voice when he thought no one could hear him. I could always hear him. "The human in the gray coat is doing the math again," Brix murmured one morning, watching Zara Voss walk to the whiteboard in her research bay. "She's been at it for 11 hours. She didn't eat. She's going to get to the number and then—" "Brix," I said. "Yes, Analyst Vrox. Your job is communications monitoring." "Monitor communications." "Yes, Analyst Vrox. She's getting close, though." I looked at the feed. Zara Voss had filled 4 of the facility's large whiteboards with calculations. She was working on the 5th. The mathematics was partially obscured by camera angle, but I could read enough of it to understand that she was working on propulsion scaling. Specifically, she was working on what happened to the gravity-fold harmonic resonance if you increased the surface area of the resonance-generating material. If you increased the surface area, If you made the skin of the aircraft bigger, if you built something larger. I looked at Naim. Naim was already looking at me. She's thinking about the next vehicle, Naim said. Yes, I said. Not another aircraft, Naim said. No, I said. We both understood what that meant. A gravity-fold-capable aircraft was a wonder, in the way that a candle in a very dark room is a wonder, significant, impressive within its scale. But a candle is not a bonfire, and an aircraft that skims a planet's atmosphere using imperfect gravity-fold harmonics is not a spacecraft that folds space and covers interstellar distances in the time it takes to drink a cup of something warm. The path from one to the other, though, was shorter than it should have been, because the principle was already established. The humans had found the note, as I had written in my personal log. They were now very clearly discovering the melody. I filed my daily report. It contained a sentence I had never expected to write in my career. The sentence was, "Recommend immediate consultation with the Vrethkai Science Directorate regarding the human gravity-fold development timeline." I had never in 42 cycles recommended anything to the Science Directorate. The Science Directorate was the body that had published the official Vrethkai theory of civilizational development, which contained the line, and I had memorized it because it was in the standard training materials. No civilization has been observed to achieve gravity-fold propulsion capability in fewer than 2,000 years of continuous technological development from first controlled flight. The humans were at 143 years from first controlled flight. Commander Tivan's response to my recommendation came in 2 hours. He had apparently already consulted the Science Directorate. Their response, per Tivan's summary, had been a lengthy technical rebuttal explaining why what I was observing was not what I was observing. Tivan's note attached to this summary read, "I sent them your raw data, they are reviewing, continue reporting." He also noted that a senior strategy review board was being convened at High Command to discuss the situation. I was to prepare a full briefing document. I prepared the briefing document. I was thorough. I am always thorough. The document was 47 pages long, and it contained, in its final section, a risk assessment that I had written with the careful, measured language of a professional analyst trying to be precise without causing a political incident. The final line of the risk assessment said, "If current development trajectories continue, Earth's human population will achieve functional interstellar gravity-fold capability within a window that Vrethkai strategic planning models are not currently equipped to address. This is not a cause for alarm. It is, however, a cause for significant and immediate attention." I thought that was restrained. Num read it over my shoulder and said, "Vrox, you basically told High Command their entire strategic framework for this sector is obsolete." "I told them to pay attention," I said. "In 47 pages," she said. "I was being thorough," I said. "You were enjoying writing it," she said. I did not respond to that. The briefing document went up the chain. We continued watching. On a morning in the 4th month of my assignment, Finn Okafor climbed into the aircraft for what the facility's internal communications had designated as Flight Series 12 full parameter test. Sorrel had gotten much better at intercepting and decoding the facility's communications by this point. He had also, in the privacy of his own small workstation, built a tracking model of the aircraft's development progress that was frankly better than the one I had built, though I did not tell him that. "Full parameter test," Sorrel said, pulling up the pre-flight checklist data. "They have made modifications to the surface geometry. The resonance panels have been reconfigured. The coverage area has increased by approximately 30%. Read out the projected harmonic output at full resonance," I said. Sorrel ran the numbers. He was quiet for a moment after the result came up. "That is significantly higher than anything they have achieved before," he said. "Yes," I said. "If they achieve full resonance at these parameters," he said carefully, "the gravity-fold interaction with local spacetime will be substantial." "It will be," I agreed, "something that I would very much like to see from a professional standpoint, and something that, from a strategic standpoint, is going to generate a great deal of paperwork." Brix at his communications station had stopped narrating. He was watching the feed with the stillness of someone who had just realized that the thing he was watching was not going to be routine. The aircraft taxied. Finn Okafor's pre-flight communications were calm, unhurried, with the compressed and precise language of a pilot who had trained his responses until urgency sounded like routine. He ran through his checks. The facility's ground team confirmed their readiness. Zara Voss's voice came through the telemetry feed from the control room saying, "Finn, you have a go for full series. Call out every 30 seconds. "Understood," Finn Okafor said. The aircraft lifted off. For the first 8 minutes, it was a normal high-performance flight. Fast, precise, climbing hard through the lower atmosphere. The gravity-fold harmonic was present but subdued, the surface resonance building gradually the way pressure builds in a vessel that is being carefully, deliberately filled. At the 9-minute mark, Finn Okafor pushed the aircraft into a sustained high-altitude run and brought the resonance system to full power. The harmonic resolved, not in the hesitant, flickering way it had resolved before. Not in the way that needed 11 tries to hold for 11 seconds. It resolved completely and immediately, the way a key turns in the lock it was made for. One instant it was building, the next instant it was there, full and coherent, and based on what my instruments were reading, stronger than anything a human technology should have been able to generate. The aircraft's speed increased. Not incrementally. It increased in the way a stone increases its speed when dropped from a height, which is to say, with the enthusiastic cooperation of physics. Velocity reading, I said. Sorrel gave me the number. I made him give it to me again, because the first time I thought I had misheard. I had not misheard. The aircraft was traveling at a velocity that, if sustained, would have taken it from the planet's surface to its moon in a time that I will describe as considerably shorter than the human's current best transit time to the moon. Because giving the exact figure would cause the kind of reaction in a reader that I am not prepared to facilitate. And then because the universe has a very specific sense of timing, 3 things happened in rapid and consecutive order. The first thing was that the aircraft's gravity-fold harmonic did not destabilize. It held, through a hard banking maneuver, through a rapid altitude change, through a speed reduction and re-acceleration that Finn Okafor performed with the methodical precision of a test pilot working through a checklist, it held, perfectly, continuously, with the easy, untroubled stability of a system that was, against all projected timelines, working. The second thing was that every sensor on the KOL-7, and I mean every sensor, registered the gravity-fold output simultaneously and triggered a cascade of automated alerts that Sorrel had definitely not programmed for this scenario, because the alerts included, bafflingly, a proximity warning, as if our ship was in danger, which it was not. We were in high orbit, but the sensor cascade was not technically wrong because what the aircraft was doing was bending local space-time in a way that registered to our sensors as an object moving very quickly in our general direction. The third thing was that Commander Tivan sent a message. The message said, in its entirety, Vrox. The Strategy Review Board has concluded that the situation requires a decision. There is disagreement about the correct course of action. I need your recommendation. You have 6 hours. I read the message. I read the situation on my main screen, where the aircraft was still flying, still holding coherent gravity-fold output, still doing the thing it should not have been able to do for another 800 years. I read Tivan's message again. Then I said, to no one in particular. Well, Naim looked at me. 6 hours, she said. 6 hours, I confirmed. For a recommendation on what, exactly, she asked. On what we do, I said, now that a species we classified as primitive category has independently developed the foundational technology of interstellar travel and appears to be figuring out what it means, faster than our models said they were supposed to. The aircraft was landing now. Clean approach, steady descent, smooth touchdown. Finn Okafor had flown a perfect test series. On the ground, the celebration was different this time. Quieter, the arm waving was there but muted, because the people gathered on that tarmac knew, in the way that people know when something has shifted from experiment to reality, that this was not a successful test, this was a successful demonstration. There is a difference. A test tells you something can work. A demonstration tells you something does work. And something that does work is a thing that the world must now arrange itself around. Zara Voss, as I had come to expect, was not celebrating. She was in the control room, with Deo Holt and Petra Selk, and I could see the 3 of them standing around a display screen, and from the way they were holding themselves, from the specific angle of Zara Voss's shoulders, and the way Deo Holt was running his hands through his hair repeatedly, which was what he did when an idea was too large to hold still, I understood that they were already past the celebration. They were already in the next problem. Sorrel, I said, analyst Vrox. What are they saying in the control room? Sorrel worked his console. The internal audio from the facility's control room was lower quality than the video feed, but he had been progressively improving his decryption of their communications protocol, and he had reached a fidelity that captured, if not every word, the essential shape of conversations. What I heard, pieced together from fragments and inference, was this. Zara Voss was talking about the surface geometry again. The resonance panel configuration. She was saying, or I believed she was saying, that the current configuration was limited not by the material's capability but by the shape it had been arranged in, that the shape was a constraint, that if the shape changed, the output would change. Dale Holt was disagreeing with something she had said. He did this reflexively, but his disagreement this time was about the scale of the proposed change, not the principle of it, which meant the principle had been accepted. Petra Selk was drawing on the nearest available surface, which appeared to be a printed flight manifest. She was drawing something that, from the camera angle, I could not fully read, but the general outline of the shape she was sketching was not the outline of an aircraft. It was not the outline of anything that was intended to fly within a planetary atmosphere. I sat with that for a moment. Then I opened Tivan's message and began to write my recommendation. I will tell you what I wrote because I think it is important, and because I think the historical record should contain an honest account of what an intelligence analyst thought, sitting in orbit above a planet, watching a species discover itself. I wrote, Commander Tivan, my recommendation is as follows. We do not intervene. We do not reveal our presence. We do not attempt to slow, redirect, or influence the human development program in any way. This is my recommendation for 3 reasons. First, the humans have arrived at gravity-fold technology through an independent path. Their approach is not identical to ours. Their resonance surface method produces a different harmonic signature than our gravity-fold generators. This is significant. It means they have found a second way to do something we believed had only one way. The scientific value of that to the Vrethkai and to the known galaxy is not something we have the right to suppress. Second, any attempt to interfere with the human program carries a detection risk that, given the current trajectory of their sensor technology, is non-trivial. The humans are not the species they were 40 years ago. They are moving faster than our models account for. If they detect us interfering with their work, the first contact scenario that results will not be one that the Vrethkai diplomatic corps is prepared to navigate. Third, and I ask that this third point be considered carefully, the humans have reached this point in 143 years from first controlled flight. They have done it through accident, argument, late nights, and the specific stubborn refusal to accept that a thing should not be possible simply because no one has done it yet. There are 6 known spacefaring civilizations in this sector of the galaxy. Not one of them arrived at their current capability by being told what they were allowed to discover. The humans deserve the same space that the Vrethkai were given when we were finding our way. They are going to join the larger community of spacefaring species. The only question worth discussing is what kind of neighbors we want to be when they arrive. I read it back. I added a 4th point, which was a technical assessment of the timeline, updated to reflect the day's flight data, and which estimated that at current development pace, the humans would have a functional interstellar range gravity-fold vehicle within 30 to 40 months. Not years. Months. I sent the report. Then I sat back and listened to the silence of the monitoring bay, which was filled with the small ambient sounds of Sorrel's console work and Brix's breathing, and the distant hum of the ship's systems, and looked at the planet below us, which was going about its enormous, complicated, perpetually argument-filled business without knowing we were there. Tivan's response came in 2 hours. It said, recommendation received and forwarded to the strategy board. Board is currently debating. Your third point has generated discussion. Stand by. Stand by. 42 cycles of intelligence work. And here I was, standing by. Vrox, Naim said, from her console. I see it, I said, because she had that tone, and when Naim used that tone something was happening on the main feed. At the desert facility lights had come on in every building. It was deep night on that part of the planet's surface. The local star was well below the horizon, and every light in the facility was burning, including in the large hangar at the edge of the compound, whose doors were open and from which a large vehicle was being moved. Not the aircraft, something new. Petra Selk's wrapper diagrams had apparently been more than theoretical. The vehicle was large, very large, larger than the aircraft by a factor that I had to ask Sorrel to confirm twice. It had no wings, it had no conventional control surfaces. Its surface was covered entirely in the resonance panels that had made the aircraft fly, but configured differently, arranged in the interlocking geometry that I had seen Petra Selk sketching, and which was, I now saw in its full realized form, a configuration that a Vrethkai materials engineer would have recognized, with a lag of about 30 seconds and a very sharp intake of breath, as being functionally equivalent to a full enclosure gravity-fold projection array. They had not just scaled the technology up. They had reinvented the enclosure geometry from first principles, arrived at an arrangement that the Vrethkai had taken 400 years to derive theoretically, and built it in a desert facility by a team that included someone who drew on food packaging. I found in this moment that I had run out of professional language for what I was feeling. All of my trained vocabulary, all of the careful, distanced, objective terminology of 42 cycles in intelligence work, was inadequate for the specific sensation of watching a species you had been assigned to observe as a primitive category civilization pull a practical interstellar vehicle out of a hangar in the middle of the night. What I felt was, if I am being entirely honest, a kind of joy. The complicated, slightly painful joy of witnessing something that renders your expectations obsolete. The joy of being completely wrong in the best possible way. "Bricks," I said. "Yes, analyst Vrox," Bricks said, very quietly, because he was watching the feed and he understood that this was not a moment for his usual dramatic narration. "Open a channel to command." I said, "Priority 1. Open." Bricks said, "Commander Tivan." I said, "I am sending you a live feed of the facility. The humans have built a second vehicle. It does not match any aircraft profile. It is a full enclosure gravity-fold configuration vehicle. It is being moved to the test area now. I am updating my timeline estimate." I paused. "New estimate," I said, "is not 30 to 40 months. It is whatever amount of time it takes them to run pre-flight checks on what I am currently looking at." Tivan did not respond immediately. The open channel carried the sound of a room at high command reacting to the live feed, which I had patched through simultaneously. I will not describe every sound I heard. I will say that the Vrethkai concept of composed professional silence was tested that night, and several members of the strategy board were found wanting. At the facility, Zara Voss walked out of the control building and crossed the compound toward the new vehicle. She was carrying her inspection device, the same one she had used on the aircraft the first time I saw it. She walked around the vehicle the same way she had walked around the aircraft, touching panels, checking seams, moving with the focused, unhurried attention of someone performing a ritual they take seriously. Finn Okafor came out behind her. He was wearing a different suit than the one he wore for the aircraft flights. The new suit was bulkier, more enclosed. It was a suit designed for an environment that did not have air in it. He stood beside Zara Voss as she finished her inspection. She handed him the inspection device. He looked at the readout. He looked at her. He said something that the audio feed captured only partially, but the fragment I caught was "everything checks," and her response was 3 words that came through clearly. "Then let's go." Sorrel made a sound that was not standard analyst behavior and was also entirely understandable given the circumstances. "Tivan," I said into the open channel, "are you watching the feed?" "We are watching the feed," Tivan said. His voice had the quality of a being who has just been told something they had intellectually accepted but had not yet emotionally processed. "The pilot is boarding the vehicle," I said. "We see that," Tivan said. "Commander," I said, "I need to know if the strategy board has a position, because in approximately 15 minutes, based on their pre-flight pattern, that vehicle is going to lift off, and based on its configuration, if the gravity fold array achieves full resonance, it will have the capability to leave the planet's atmosphere and enter orbital space." "Our orbital space," Sorrel said quietly to himself, and then looked alarmed that he had said it out loud. He was not wrong. Our orbital space. The space where 3 Vrethkai observation vessels were sitting in cloak, watching a species they had classified as primitive category prepare to, in practical terms, arrive. "Tivan," I said. "Stand by," Tivan said. I waited. The facility's ground crew was completing final preparations. Deo Holt was visible through the control room window, standing at a terminal, and he was not arguing with anyone, which told me that all the arguments had been resolved, that everything that needed to be agreed upon had been agreed upon, and what remained was the thing itself. Petra Selk was at the window too. She was not drawing on anything. She was watching, just watching, with her arms folded, and the expression of an engineer who has finished building a thing and is waiting to find out if the thing works. "Vrox," Tivan said. "Commander, the strategy board has reached a decision," he said. "You are to maintain current observation protocols. No contact, no interference. Continue reporting." "Understood," I said. "Vrox." "Commander." A pause. Then, "Your third point. About the kind of neighbors we want to be." It was noted. I did not respond to that. There was nothing useful to add. I closed the priority channel and returned to my console. The vehicle lifted off at precisely the moment the pre-flight sequence concluded. Not with a roar of chemical combustion, not with the violent, hopeful fire of a rocket ascending on the faith that controlled explosions could outrun gravity. It lifted in silence. its gravity-fold array generating a resonance field that displaced local spacetime with an efficiency that my instruments marked as 91% of theoretical maximum, which was, I will note for the record, better than the Vrethkai's first full-enclosure prototype had managed on its maiden flight. It rose through the atmosphere. It passed through the boundary where the air ends and space begins, and it did not stop. It kept rising, climbing out of the planet's gravity well, with the easy purpose of something that has been designed to do exactly this. It entered orbital space, our orbital space, where 3 cloaked Vrethkai observation vessels were sitting in absolute silence, watching it come. "Sorel," I said, "confirm cloak integrity." "Full cloak integrity confirmed," Sorel said. "No EM leakage, no gravity signature, we are completely undetectable." The vehicle continued its ascent. It passed through low orbit. It adjusted its heading, a small correction that Finn Okafor performed with the unhurried smoothness that had characterized every maneuver I had observed him make. The gravity-fold array maintained resonance with a steadiness that I had stopped expecting and started, somewhere in the previous hour, accepting as simply what these humans were capable of. The vehicle reached a high orbit. It circled the planet once, slowly, with the patience of beings who are seeing something for the first time from a perspective they have never had before and who are choosing to pay attention to it. And then on the second orbit, passing through the sector of space where the KOL-7 was positioned, something happened that Sorel noticed first, because Sorel, I will say for the record, was an exceptionally good technician who deserved more credit than I gave him on a daily basis. "Analyst Vrox," Sorel said, very slowly. "The vehicle is emitting a scanning pulse." I looked at his console. The vehicle had generated a brief, precise pulse of electromagnetic energy on a frequency that was not used by any human communication or navigation technology I had catalogued. It was not a known human frequency. It was a frequency that my database flagged after a 1-second processing delay as falling within the range used by Vrethkai short-range detection systems. The range used by Vrethkai short-range detection systems. "That is not possible," I said, in the same tone that I had used approximately 6 months ago when the first anomalous energy reading came in and I had filed it as Category 3. "The pulse was very targeted," Sorel said. He was pulling up the directional data. "It was not a broad-spectrum scan. It was focused. It was focused on this sector of orbital space." I looked at the directional data. I looked at the vector of the scan pulse. I looked at the exact coordinates it had been centered on. It had been centered on the KOL-7. The room was very quiet. The kind of quiet that happens when a number of professional beings simultaneously reach the same conclusion and none of them want to be the first to say it. "Brix said it. They know we are here," Brix said. "They detected something," I said carefully. "They may not know what they detected. They sent a targeted pulse on a Vrethkai frequency to our exact coordinates," Naim said. "They may have arrived at that frequency independently," I said. "Vox," Nim said gently, in the tone she used when she wanted me to stop being professionally stubborn about something obvious. I stopped being professionally stubborn about something obvious. I looked at the feed. The vehicle was continuing its orbit. No change in trajectory. No aggressive movement. No secondary systems activation. Just the vehicle, circling the planet, in the company of 3 cloaked Vrethkai observers that its crew may or may not have just confirmed the existence of. Then Finn Okafor's voice came through on the telemetry feed. He was speaking to the ground, to the control room where Zara Voss and Dio Holt and Petra Selk were watching his feeds from below. He said, with the calm precision that was his standard register for everything from pre-flight checks to apparently, "This ground I have a reading at bearing 274 high orbit. Possible contact not matching any known profile." Zara Voss's voice came back immediately. She said, "Copy that, Finn. Maintain current orbit. Do not approach. Broadcast on the pulse frequency." A pause. Then, clearly, on the exact frequency they had used for the targeted scan, a transmission went out from the vehicle. A short, structured sequence. Not random, not noise. A sequence. I had been in intelligence work for 42 cycles, and I recognized a greeting signal when I heard one. The humans were saying hello. They were saying hello to ships they could not see, in a sector of space they had reached 4 hours ago for the first time, using a frequency they should not have known to use, with a calmness that suggested this was a possibility they had considered and prepared for. I stared at the transmission data for a long time. Then I looked at Naim. Naim was looking at me. Sorel and Brix and the rest of the team were all looking at me because I was the senior analyst, and the senior analyst, in this moment, was supposed to know what to do. I opened a channel to Tevan. "Commander," I said. I heard it, Tivan said. He sounded like a being who had been running a very long race and had just seen the finish line appear approximately 3 kilometers before he expected it. They are waiting for a response, I said. I know. The strategy board's current directive is no contact, I said. I know, Tivan said again. Commander, they already know we are here. The question of contact has been, in a practical sense, answered by them. We are discussing the formality of our response, not the existence of the situation. A long pause, the longest pause Tivan had ever taken in my experience of working with him. Then he said, What do you think, Vrox? I thought about Zara Voss looking up at the sky in the afternoon light. I thought about Finn Okafor's voice, steady and unhurried, calling out a contact bearing. I thought about Dio Holt arguing, and Petra Selk drawing on food packaging, and Sorrel's tracking model that was better than mine, and Brix narrating the feeds in a low voice when he thought no one could hear, and the 11 seconds that had become minutes that had become this, all of this, in the time it had taken me to file 47 reports. I thought about my personal log entry from the 10th day of my assignment. They found the note. They don't know they are playing the whole song yet. They knew. They were playing the whole song. And it was, whatever else it was, extraordinary. I think, I said, that we say hello back. Tivan was quiet for one more moment, then authorized, keep it brief, diplomatic protocol minimum, and Vrox, Commander. Write up how they found us. That particular question is going to be asked at every level of command for the next decade, and I would prefer to have your analysis ready. Already started, I said. I had not started it yet. I started it immediately after I closed the channel. Brix was looking at me with an expression of barely contained excitement that I found in this specific moment entirely appropriate. Open the broadcast frequency, I said. Open, Brix said. I sat for a moment. 42 cycles of intelligence work, and nothing in any training document, operational manual, or field guide had covered this exact scenario. A primitive category civilization that had, in the span of my single assignment, rendered the concept of primitive category meaningless by the simple expedient of being the humans. I pressed the broadcast key. This is Vrox, I said, Senior Intelligence Analyst, Vrethkai Galactic Empire, aboard the observation vessel KOL-7. We have been monitoring your development for several months. Your signal was received. We acknowledge your presence. A pause. 3 seconds. 4. Then from the vehicle in orbit, from the calm and unhurried voice of a pilot who had been flying impossible things since before I had arrived in this solar system, and who apparently added first contact to the list with the same steadiness he brought to everything else. Finn Okafor said, This is Finn Okafor, test pilot, Earth. Good to know you are out there. We had a feeling. I sat back in my chair. You had a feeling. Of course they had. I looked at Naim. Naim looked at me. And then, because it was the only intellectually honest response available to me, I laughed. A real laugh. The kind that you cannot prepare for, and cannot professional distance your way out of. The kind that comes from being completely, thoroughly, and wonderfully wrong about what something was going to turn out to be. Naim was smiling. Sorrel was grinning with his entire face. Brix had both hands over his mouth, not narrating anything for once, simply experiencing the moment. Below us, on the blue planet wrapped in its atmospheric haze, Zara Voss and her team were in the control room. And whatever they were feeling, they had earned it, completely, without qualification or caveat. The humans had controlled the ground. Then they had controlled the sky. Then they had taken gravity personally, in the most literal sense that phrase could ever be applied to a sentient species, and they had done it in 143 years from their first controlled flight. And now they were here, in our orbital space, saying hello. And the thing was, the genuinely, completely, thoroughly remarkable thing that I would spend the rest of my career, and if I am honest, the rest of my life, trying to fully understand was this. They were not afraid. Not the pilot in orbit, not the team on the ground, not the woman who had filled 5 whiteboards with calculations in the middle of the night and nodded once at a vehicle she had spent 20 months building and said, with the quiet confidence of someone who had earned it, let's go. The universe had spent a very long time being arranged in an orderly fashion. First flight to first orbit to first star. Over hundreds and thousands of years, civilization by civilization, each one following the path that physics and time and incremental knowledge laid down. The humans had looked at that path, and they had found a shortcut. Not by being given one, not by being shown one, by arguing about aircraft surfaces late at night in a desert and accidentally bending gravity, and then refusing to stop until they understood what they had bent it with. and what else it could do, and where it could take them. I filed my final report of the mission. It was, by some distance, the best thing I had ever written. And the last line of it said, "Category reassignment recommended. Earth's human population is no longer classified as primitive category. Proposed new classification, contact ready. Recommend opening of formal diplomatic channel at earliest opportunity. I will note for the record that they are going to be extraordinary neighbors. And I will further note that whoever said we controlled the skies was, as of tonight, describing a situation that no longer exists. The humans took it personally. Good for them.